I know the world is constantly rushing, scrolling, skipping, speeding past moments that were meant to matter. You have 100 reasons to skip this video, and maybe only one to stay. So if you're still here, even for a few seconds, thank you. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I rewrite it with the patience of someone who was forgotten. For years, I stood in rooms full of people who knew my name, but never truly saw me. I don't expect this to change anything. Just hope that maybe, just maybe, you'll find a quiet place in this story where you feel less alone. And if you do, a gentle tap on the like button, just to let me know someone is still listening. The day of the funeral, it rained as if the sky was exhausted. Not dramatic thunder or heavy drops, just a steady drizzle, soft and gray, like the world was tired of grieving. Her name was Emma. She was 8 weeks old when her lungs gave out. She died in her sleep. No warning, no final sound. I remember carrying her coffin. It was so small, too small to be real, like a cruel joke from the universe. The chapel was filled with family. Some I hadn't seen in years. Tight black dresses, neatly tied ties, fake tears behind polished sunglasses. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because my tears had dried up somewhere between the emergency room and the coroner's signature. I stood alone in the front pew. No husband, no partner, just me and the echo of lullabies I would never sing again. That's when she came up behind me, my mother. Her heels clicked softly on the stone floor, like a metronome of old resentments. She leaned in close. Her voice was a whisper, but loud enough for the others nearby to hear. "You don't deserve a family." My breath caught. I didn't turn around, didn't flinch, didn't react. I just stood there, frozen, like someone had poured concrete into my spine. The silence that followed was louder than a slap. And no one, not my father, not my sister, not a single cousin, said a word. They just pretended not to hear. The funeral went on. The priest spoke of grace, of sorrow, of light. But none of it touched me. I was a ghost at my own child's farewell. When it was over, people began to leave. A few gave me soft nods or brittle hugs. Most just avoided eye contact. I was folding Emma's tiny blanket into my purse when the priest approached me. He hesitated, then gently tapped my arm. "She asked me to give you this, before she changed her mind." He handed me a plain white envelope. My name, Natalie, was written in cursive I recognized immediately. It was my mother's handwriting. I didn't open the letter that night. I couldn't. It sat untouched on my kitchen counter, next to the last bottle I'd warmed for Emma and never used. Instead, I washed my hands over and over again, as if I could scrub the funeral off my skin, as if grief was dirt I had forgotten to wipe away. And I kept hearing it, that sentence. "You don't deserve a family." It wasn't the first time my mother had said something like that. It was just the first time she'd said it in public. At a funeral, at my daughter's funeral. I was raised in a house where silence had weight, where love was measured in judgments and approval had terms and conditions. I remember once, I was 10, I drew a picture of our family for school. Me, my sister Angela, Mom, and Dad. We were holding hands in front of the house. I even drew tulips along the walkway because I thought they were Mom's favorite. She looked at it when I showed her. Didn't smile, didn't say, "Good job," just sipped her tea and said, "You made your arms too fat. Be more mindful of proportion next time." That was how affection came in our house, dressed as critique. Angela always got the soft tone, the warm eyes. When she got a B+, it was, "You did your best." When I got an A, it was, "Could have been an A+ if you didn't get distracted." When Angela cried, she got comfort. When I cried, I got told I was being dramatic. Even birthdays felt different. One year, 16, I baked my own cake. Mom had forgotten the date, said she thought it was the next weekend. Angela got a spa day and a necklace. I got a text at 7:34 p.m. Hope you had a nice day. Don't overeat cake. She said it was just her way, said I was too sensitive, that I read too much into things. But that feeling of being edited out, it followed me everywhere. Even when I got pregnant, she asked if I was keeping it, like it was a stain on the carpet. I was 22, broke, scared, but I wanted Emma. And my mother? She didn't come to the hospital when she was born, didn't send flowers, didn't hold her even once. When I brought Emma to visit months later, she said, "Babies shouldn't be raised in apartments, especially not by girls who still haven't figured out life." I laughed that day, out loud, because if I didn't laugh, I would have screamed. But that was her way. Make the cut, then call you rude for bleeding. So no. Her words at the funeral weren't new. They were just the final brick in a wall she'd spent years building between us. And still, I hadn't opened the letter, because part of me wondered, what else could she possibly take away? It was Mrs. Leary, our old neighbor, who broke the silence. I saw her at the grocery store 3 days after the funeral. She had a bag of apples in one hand and grief in her eyes. "Natalie," she said softly, "I just wanted to say, I remember how much you used to help me with groceries when your mom said she was too busy." I blinked. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even sympathy, but it was recognition. And in a way, that hit harder. "She didn't always speak that way about you," she added. "Not when you were little." I wanted to believe her. I did, but all I remembered was being invisible. Even during Emma's birth, things felt off. The hospital never called my emergency contact, my mom, even when I listed her. Later, I found out the number I had for her had been disconnected. When I asked, she shrugged. "New phone. You should have asked for the new number." And the cousin who mailed me a gift set for Emma? She asked weeks later why I hadn't thanked her. I never got it, never even heard about it. At the time, I assumed the mail messed up. Now I wasn't so sure. It felt like pieces of a puzzle I never knew I was solving were suddenly sliding together. Little things, sharp in retrospect. My college acceptance letter that went missing until it was past the deadline to accept. A voicemail from a job recruiter I never heard about, because someone forgot to give me the message. The time I showed up to a family barbecue and found out it had ended an hour earlier than they told me. Back then, I called them mistakes, misunderstandings. I gave benefit after benefit of the doubt. But now, I started to wonder. Had my mother been editing me out of my own life? One evening, while sorting through Emma's things, tiny socks, a half-written baby journal, I found an old scrapbook. Tucked inside was a photo of me at 7, holding a gold ribbon from the school science fair. I remembered that day vividly. I was so proud. Until I brought it home, and Mom said, "Don't let this go to your head. You're not Einstein, just organized." It was the first time I ever threw away a trophy. I told her I lost it. She never asked again. I touched the photo, tracing my own small face. My eyes were hopeful back then, still soft around the edges. I whispered to the photo, "Did you know it would turn out like this?" Outside, the streetlight flickered. Inside, the envelope still waited. And for the first time, I wanted to know what it said. I opened the envelope just before midnight. The edges were worn like it had been handled too many times. Picked up, put down, maybe rewritten. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. Slanted cursive I hadn't seen since childhood notes on the fridge. It began, "If you're reading this, then I've already told the story wrong in public. I sat down. Natalie, you were never supposed to be mine. Not fully. I know that sounds cruel, but it's the truth that shaped everything. My chest tightened. You were the child I had after the miscarriage, the one I didn't want to feel attached to. I told myself you were a replacement, and I hated myself for even thinking that. Her words cut deep, not because they were new, but because they explained what I had only ever guessed. Angela was easy to love. She smiled at everything. You came out screaming, and I never forgave you for surviving when another didn't. My hands trembled. I didn't sabotage you to hurt you. I did it because every time you shined, it reminded me of what I had lost. Your wins felt like insults. Your independence felt like rejection. I stopped reading. I needed air. I stood by the window, watching the city breathe. Emma had looked so much like me. Same nose, same stubborn chin. And for a moment, I wondered, had my mother looked at her and seen me all over again? I returned to the letter. I told the family you were unstable, that you couldn't be trusted. I said those things not because they were true, but because if they believed them, I didn't have to look at myself. So many memories began to rearrange themselves. I kept your cousin's gift. I changed your phone number on your job applications. I lied. I sabotaged. I erased. And still, you kept showing up. Quiet, polite, still trying to love me. Tears came, finally, not out of sadness, but out of sheer exhaustion. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know. The story I told the world about you, it wasn't real. You are the strongest, most resilient person I've ever known, and I don't deserve you. There was no signature, just a final line. Tell Emma, I'm sorry. I hope she got your heart, not mine. I folded the letter carefully, as if crumpling it would make it less real. For a long time, I sat in silence, watching my reflection in the window, the letter still warm from my hands. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt seen, not loved, not healed, but seen. Clearly, painfully, honestly. That was enough. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Not at first. I needed time. Time to let the words settle, to let the truth thread itself into the cracks of my story. But something shifted in me. A stillness, maybe. Not peace, but the silence that comes just after the storm, when the debris hasn't been cleared, but the wind has stopped screaming. 3 weeks later, I heard they were hosting a family brunch. Angela's house. The kind where the walls smell like expensive candles, and apologies never reach the table. I wasn't invited. Of course I wasn't. But I went anyway. I didn't wear black. I didn't wear grief. I wore white. A soft blouse, clean lines, steady breath. I didn't want to haunt them. I wanted to be undeniable. When I stepped through the backyard gate, conversation slowed. Coffee cups froze mid-air. Angela's laugh died in her throat. Dad looked down like the grass suddenly fascinated him. Mom wasn't there yet. Angela stood, arms folded like a barrier. We didn't know you were coming, she said flatly. I know, I replied. That's why I came. I didn't ask for a plate. I didn't sit. I walked to the patio table and gently placed a picture frame on it, facing them. Inside the frame was the letter. Typed. Word for word. No edits. No embellishment. Just truth. Angela blinked. Her eyes scanned the page. Dad leaned in. His face went pale. I watched them read it, line by line, as the walls they had built began to tremble. No one spoke. Then a quiet voice behind me. She made me promise not to tell you. I turned. It was the priest. I hadn't seen him arrive. He nodded toward the letter. She wrote it months ago. gave it to me with instructions. Only if she buries the child alone. I didn't say anything, because what was there to say? They had let me bury my daughter alone. They had let her spit poison into my grief and called it silence. I wasn't here to shame them. I wasn't here to reclaim space. I was here to remind them. I existed. Emma existed. And the story they told themselves wasn't the only one that mattered. Mom arrived 20 minutes later. She saw the frame. She saw my face. And for the first time in years, she looked away. She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask for forgiveness. She just walked inside the house and didn't come back out. I stood there a little longer, let the wind touch my skin, let the stillness sit. Then I turned, picked up the frame, and left. I didn't slam the gate. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked down the driveway. Bare shoulders, light step, grief behind me like a shadow that no longer led the way. The truth didn't explode. It echoed, quietly, relentlessly. The following week, the priest confirmed everything. He didn't do it in anger. He didn't name names. He just stood before his congregation and said, "There are stories we tell to protect ourselves, and there are stories we hide, because we're ashamed of the damage we've done." The room stilled. Everyone knew. They always did. They just didn't want it said aloud. My mother stopped attending service after that. Angela posted cryptic quotes about false narratives and loyalty on her socials. My father stayed silent, as always, but the letter had changed something. Not in them, in me. I got a call a few days later from the family's lawyer. Apparently, my grandmother had left me something. A cottage, 1 hour outside of Charleston. Modest, quiet, secluded. Angela was furious, called it favoritism, but the lawyer said plainly, "Your grandmother specified it. Natalie is the only one who knew how to listen without needing the last word." That's what she said. It wasn't about the cottage. It was what it symbolized. A place I didn't have to ask permission to enter. A door I didn't have to knock on. A seat that was always mine. When I arrived, the place smelled like cedar and age. The windows were dusty. The floors creaked. But it felt safe. I found old notebooks tucked in drawers, photos of my grandmother in the garden, and a small painting of a girl sitting under a dogwood tree, alone, but content. It was labeled, "She doesn't wait anymore." I cried then, not for Emma, not for my mother, but for the girl I used to be, the one who waited for praise, waited to be chosen, waited to be seen. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. Emma's blanket, her tiny socks, the photo of her smiling with her gummy grin. I hung it over the mantel. No shrine, no sadness, just presence. I lit a candle every evening, not out of ritual, but out of intention, because I had made it through, and the light reminded me. I didn't just survive my mother. I reclaimed my name. I didn't expect them to come, but they did. 2 weeks after I moved into the cottage, Angela showed up first. No call, no warning. Just her car idling at the edge of the gravel path. She wore designer sunglasses and that same carefully curated pane she always carried like a purse. I stepped onto the porch. Waited. She got out slowly, holding nothing, her arms crossed like armor. "You embarrassed Mom," she said flatly. "She embarrassed herself," I replied. "I just stopped covering for it." She flinched. "Dad's not doing well. He barely speaks." "He never did," I said. "That's the problem." She walked closer, shoes crunching on leaves. "You could have handled it privately. The letter didn't need to be shared." I looked at her for a long time. Really looked. Same eyes as mine, but no softness. "It was shared with me first," I said. "Everything else was already public. The lies, the silence, the exile. Why should the truth be whispered?" Angela sat on the porch step. A beat passed. "She's spiraling," she murmured. "Says you've ruined her, that people at church are talking." "They should talk," I said. "They listened when she called me unstable. When she said I was unfit to be a mother. No one questioned her then." Angela didn't reply. The wind moved between us. It carried the sound of birds, of leaves returning to trees. "You know," I added, "she told me I didn't deserve a family, in front of a priest, at my daughter's funeral." Angela finally looked at me. Her eyes glistened. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask." That landed harder than I expected. She looked down at her shoes. "Why didn't you ever fight back?" she whispered. "Because I thought if I stayed quiet, I'd eventually be seen as worthy," I said. "Turns out silence doesn't buy love. It just buries you deeper." I stood. "I'm not angry anymore, Angela, but I won't be your family's shadow to make their spotlight brighter." She opened her mouth, closed it, then stood and walked to her car. "Will you ever come back?" she asked before opening the door. I shook my head. "You never left the table for me. I won't shrink myself to sit at it now." She nodded once, got in, drove away. I exhaled, not in triumph, but in release. I went inside, lit Emma's candle, watched the flame dance in the quiet. No shouting, no apologies, just truth. That was enough. There was no dramatic cut, no slam door, no grand announcement of severance, just absence. A quiet unraveling of the ties I once knotted so tightly around their approval. I didn't block their numbers, didn't post a public statement, didn't demand they say sorry. I simply stopped waiting to be invited, stopped waiting to be noticed, stopped waiting for love that only showed up when it was convenient. People always think walking away is loud, but sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it's a woman standing in her grandmother's kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped mug, finally not looking over her shoulder. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, but it was a clean kind of empty. Like a house cleared after a storm. Windows broken, yes, but you can breathe again. One night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees, watching the moon stretch itself across the lake. And I whispered to the wind, "I don't need to be loved anymore. I just need to be real." I meant it, because love that demands you disappear isn't love. It's control. And I had been disappearing my entire life, editing myself to make others comfortable, shrinking so their egos could stretch. Not anymore. I didn't need the apology, didn't need the backpedaling, didn't need their sudden interest now that silence was no longer my default. I needed space. Space to breathe, to grieve, to exist outside the roles they assigned me. So I gave myself that. And when no one showed up to pull me back into their chaos, I knew. They never truly held me. I was just easier to carry when I was small. I folded the letter and placed it into a cedar box beside Emma's blanket. Not to keep it hidden, but to say, this is part of the story, not the whole of it. From now on, my life would not be measured by their absence, but by my own presence, unapologetic, unfolded, mine. I didn't rebuild with fire. I rebuilt with light. It started small, an online grief support group for single mothers. 5 women, then 15, then more than I could count. We didn't talk about getting over it. We talked about getting through it. Every Tuesday night we met, some with babies in their laps, some still carrying loss like phantom limbs. We lit candles together over Zoom, not for closure, but for connection. I called it Emma's table, because Emma never got to sit at one. So I built one for the women who needed it most. The cottage turned into a space of healing. I converted the back room into a community art studio. The walls filled with finger paintings, journal pages, poetry typed on crumpled paper. We planted a garden behind the house. Forget-me-nots, daffodils, wild mint. A woman named Cassie brought a tiny bench one day, said it was for sitting still on hard days. Another woman, Anna, brought a notebook her daughter had doodled in before her accident. We placed it on a shelf with Emma's baby journal. We didn't curate grief, we just let it exist, like wind, like memory. Some days, I'd sit in the studio alone and reread the letter from my mother. Not because I missed her, but because I needed to remind myself. That kind of silence no longer defined me. I hung a small wooden sign over the studio door. She doesn't wait anymore. It matched the painting I'd found in the cottage. Same tree, same girl. Just older now, not smiling, but steady. I didn't tell the world what I was doing, didn't post about it, didn't try to make it grand. This wasn't for applause. It was for repair. Every time a woman said, "This group saved me," I whispered back, "You saved yourself." Because I wasn't anyone's hero. I was just a woman who refused to stay erased. And now, piece by piece, I was becoming whole. Morning light spills through the windows now, like a blessing that doesn't ask for anything in return. No performance, no perfection, just presence. I wake before the sun most days. Light a candle for Emma, boil water for tea, watch the mist roll off the lake behind the cottage. There is a quiet here that doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like room. Room for memory, yes, but also for something else. Peace. I hang wind chimes from the eaves, the kind that make music only when the air decides to move. No force, just invitation. Yesterday, Lila, one of the women from Emma's table, asked if she could plant a magnolia tree in the garden. She said, "It's for the daughter I lost, so her name can grow in the soil." We dug the hole together. We said her daughter's name like a hymn. And when we were done, I gave her a ceramic marker that read, "Still here, just differently." The kind of thing I wish someone had said to me back then. I still get texts from Angela sometimes, mostly quiet ones. No more accusations, just photos of her son drawing, or a sunrise she thought I'd like. I respond sometimes. Sometimes I don't. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. Last week, I got a letter, handwritten, from my mother. She didn't ask for anything, just said she was starting therapy, said she read the confession again and didn't recognize the woman who wrote it. I didn't write back. But I lit a candle that night and said aloud, "Thank you for trying." That was enough. This morning, I stood by the tree Lila planted, a light breeze brushing past my skin, birds singing without permission. I whispered to Emma, "We're okay now, because we are. Not healed, but whole, and that's a different kind of victory." Before heading back inside, I glanced at the quote carved into the studio's stone bench, the one I chose the day I opened our doors. Some relationships are roots, others are weights, and for the first time in my life, I knew which ones I wanted to carry. This story isn't just about grief or betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice after being edited out of your own life. Many of us grow up shrinking ourselves to fit into the spaces others give us, only to discover that our worth was never theirs to define. Natalie's journey is a soft rebellion, not of revenge, but of healing through boundary, purpose, and self-recognition. For the viewer who has ever felt invisible at the family table, or heard love offered with conditions, this story reminds you, you don't have to earn your place in someone's life. You get to build your own table and choose who sits at it. May you walk away from this story not with anger, but with clarity. And if you stayed till the end, thank you.